So 3 years ago, I went to an economic development conference where the guy talked about supply and demand of the market and the market efficiencies. And after his discussion, I had a question that I had to ask. I got up, I went to the front of the room, grabbed the microphone, and I said, hey, my name's Brian Watson. I grew up on the western slope of Colorado in a small town. I recently just moved back. And it seems like all of my friends are leaving. All of the companies are going out of business, or a lot of companies are going out of business. And it seems like our community is trending in the wrong direction. As an economist, what's your suggestion? What can I do to change that? And as a good economist, he said, well, the supply and demand of the market kind of works how it works. So if that's what it is telling you, that's kind of how things are going to go. And like the wind went out of my sails, and I remember just driving home after that conference, sitting in my car for about 3 hours and saying, screw that. I refuse to sit on the sideline and watch my community go into a different direction than I want. I want to help gather entrepreneurs together. And so that's what we did. A few friends of mine started gathering entrepreneurs. We believe that if you want strong and vibrant communities, you need strong and vibrant entrepreneurs in those communities. So we started a co-working space. I'm Brian, I'm one of the co-founders of Proximity Space. And if you've not heard about co-working is a global mega trend that's starting to take place everywhere. In communities that are small, in co-working spaces like Ski Locker, like Barkley has started, as well as large organizations. It's also quickly becoming the go-to economic development solution, popping up in communities that are large and small. So, talking about co-working space is awesome. Managing them is a huge pain in the ass. There's a lot to deal with. You've got members that you have to manage. You have billing that you have to deal with. You're a program and events specialist oftentimes. You've got people that want to book conference rooms. There's just a lot to deal with. And so that's one of the big problems that we dealt with when we first started. What's the solution look like? The solution looks a lot like Proximity Space. A software that helps you automate the day-to-day activities in your location so that you can get back to what's most important, which is managing and growing your community. Our software helps you manage your members, manage billing, allows your members to book conference rooms, access doors, and much, much more. So if you've been paying attention to the co-working industry, it's growing really fast. Last year, there was over 18,000 co-working spaces that had opened up internationally. And all of this is really being fueled by the remote workforce. So as of the year 2020, so next year, can't believe we're almost at 2020, 50% of the workforce will be remote enabled, which means they can work, live, and play wherever they want. And so it's places like Steamboat that are really going to capitalize on co-working space. If we zoom into that, actually the fastest third of the industry is growing not from spaces like WeWork, who you hear a lot about, or Regis, but it's actually the mom and pops that are popping up all over the place in communities, large and small. Proximity's growing fast too. It's hard to imagine that 14 months ago, we had our first client. We built our own software and had a friend, actually Aaron Landau out of Evo 3 in Frisco, reach out to us and say, what are you guys using for your software? And so we added him 14 months ago, and since then we've grown a lot. We've opened spaces not only on the western slope, not only in Colorado, but nationally and internationally, places like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and that number continues to grow. This is actually a couple weeks old. We're in over 185 spaces now. So the cool thing about this is as we're adding spaces, we're also adding members of those spaces to the network. These are not just people who are working in an office. These are men and women who are starting companies. These are software developers, programmers, graphic designers, and lots of talented people. And so as we continue to develop, we're not just developing software, but also building tools for people to work how they want to and how they're going to continue to work in the future. We recently, so we've added a lot of spaces on the left, and that number of people is growing. So we're building new products as well. Products like Proximity Nomad, which allows members to book by credits, and then they can go and access any of the co-working spaces on the network and work wherever they want. So this morning, when I had a call that I had to do at 9 a.m., I was able to go book a office with Barkley, pay him remotely, and check into the co-working space and have a great location to host my meeting, which went well. Thanks, Barkley. So what's the competition looking like? Well, we have competitors. They've been around for a while. And actually one of the advantages that we have is we got to use some of their software, take the things that worked, and then start applying them in a different way and look at where the market was going and not where it's been in the past. So we've done a couple things different. We've developed not only the software to manage your space, but we've also developed hardware ourselves, which means instead of buying 3 different softwares and a door access system and paying for all of those things independently, you just pay one easy, manageable price, and we take care of everything for you. Another huge benefit is that we're not trying to be a SaaS. We're not trying to be another software company. We're trying to build a network of privately owned co-working spaces that can work together and create sustainability for entrepreneurs. And so I think one of the best things that I heard was a customer last week said, we didn't choose your software, we chose to join your network. And I think that that is a huge testament to what we're trying to do. So we are continuing to grow, and actually the first 100 spaces that we joined, that joined our network, paved the path for our next 1,000, 1,525 spaces that are coming online. This is allowing us to not only work with small communities, but as we've continued to develop our product, we've been able to introduce features that are allowing us to go get bigger spaces as well as multi-spaces, which means more entrepreneurs on the network, more people helping each other, and more sustainability. We've gotten really good press too. So Inc. magazine actually named us the #3 co-working space in the United States, which is, again, a huge testament, not to proximity, but what can happen when a bunch of independent co-working spaces and entrepreneurs join together to create sustainability. Forbes ranked us the #1 co-working space on Earth. This is great feedback, but it's not as good as the feedback as we get from our customers every day. I love this from Caroline out of Waco Work in Texas. She said, proximity quite literally saved my co-working space. And that means so much to us. Getting feedback like that is so important because, again, these are the men and women who are opening spaces to impact their community. These are the people who are rolling up their sleeves and trying to support entrepreneurs to make an impact on their community. And we want to do everything that we can to support them. Not just sell them software, but help train them and give them all the resources that they need. So we're doing our Series A. We're raising $5 million right now. We've built an incredible team, and our team is diverse. So one of the great things about our company is that we've built everything, our software and our hardware, in 14 months, and we've done it all in-house. That means none of the money that we've raised prior has gone to outside contractors. Everything that we've built is proprietary and has been built in-house, which also means that we can develop faster and better tools quicker. And so if we get feedback, we don't have to work with a contractor to fix the problem. We can fix it all ourselves. I'm Brian Watson. Thank you so much for letting me speak. I've got 2 quick asks. If you want to talk to us about funding, we'd be happy to talk to you. If you know anyone who's opening a co-working space or has an existing co-working space, please, please, please tell them about Proximity Space. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Co-working is pretty big, but I'm sure we got a couple of questions. Go for it.
So we have a really simple revenue model. We work with all of our companies, and then we take 5% gross. So we take 5% off the top, and then push the 95% up to our co-working spaces. Evan.
I have a quick question.
What's up,
I'll just give a quick plug. I'm with CoVenture in Carbondale. We just started using Proximity. It's fabulous. Their customer service is out of this world. It's for a bunch of people that have never managed a co-working space, and some of whom, myself included, are not techie. It's fabulous. My question is, how close together are you going to encourage co-working spaces to open near each other? When you talk about proximity, what is the kind of target proximity that you're wanting those spaces to be opened to each other?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're really talking about what is, the perfect density for co-working spaces. I think in small towns you think like, oh my God, we got 1 co-working space and now we're gonna get a second one. How many can we sustain? You have to remember places like Denver have over 100 co-working spaces there, and there's tons of density. And not all co-working spaces are the same, which is good. They're attracting different types of people, and so you have different demographics that are naturally prone to go into different co-working spaces, and then they can work together. And so I guess a vague answer to your question is there can be lots of co-working spaces together, one of the things that's really important for us in an economic development standpoint is one of the big challenges of communities is just the general lack of density. And as we add more and more co-working spaces onto the platform, we're able to kind of aggregate those communities and create digital density, which helps with sustainability. So again, the example that I always point to is in Grand Junction. When we first started, we didn't know if we had entrepreneurs. We found a bunch of them, but we don't have a big mentor network or a big venture capital network in Grand Junction. But our friends at Telluride have a lot of mentors, a lot of angel investors and stuff like that, and so we can connect and mesh our groups together and support each other. So I don't know if that answered your question fully, but I think there could be a lot.
I got one.
Yeah, please.
It's a little bit less about proximity, but co-working in general. I mean, Steamboat Springs, roughly 10% of our population is location neutral, right? Remote workforce. You'd never know that equates to 1,300 people working in their homes, because unless you're already in their bike riding group, you don't see them. But I think it's a growing trend, right, for companies to pay for co-working, other things, right? What kind of other incentives and things do you see, with 1,300 people in this community that could conceivably, do part-time in an office in town? What are some of the drivers that help get people into these spaces?
That's a great question. And one of the reasons we built our software is because when you start your co-working space, there's so much work of just managing the space. We wanted to automate it. A lot of that traffic is really being driven by events and stuff like that. So you talked about Startup Weekend, events like that. When we first started in Grand Junction, it was Go Code Colorado was the catalyst that really brought us together first. And I think being able to do different events that are pulling people out of their houses is super important, and it's really important for the ecosystem development in each community as well. Again, you need that density to create critical mass, and so I hope that answers your question. I think the big thing that is driving people is, well, I guess there's two things, I'm sorry. So one of the things that I always say is co-working spaces help eliminate the barriers to entry for small businesses. So just by giving resources, if you're working remotely out of your house and you don't have a good broadband connection or something like that, and it's cost prohibitive because there's a last mile problem, then that's a challenge. With co-working space, you give all those resources in one spot. So fast internet, conference rooms, furniture, and then a networking community to support people. And then on top of that, we're seeing our co-working space owners and managers throw events and parties to invite people back into the space, which all just kind of like snowballs on top of each other.
All right, anybody else? Oh.
Hey, since you mentioned diversity, I wasn't going to bring it up, but what are you doing to bring more women and people of color, not just to your team, but also to like the remote force and as owners of these spaces?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. So we live on the western slope in Grand Junction, which is like the least diverse place ever. But we're working really hard. So actually, our company is 50% men, 50% women. Our dev team is comprised of both men and women, which we're really excited about. And our leadership has a lot of females involved too. And so I think it's just something that you have to continue bringing up in conversation and making choices to encourage those people, let them have opportunities at the table. I do an online co-working community call where we have co-working spaces from all over the nation call in, and we just recently did one around creating diversity and inclusion opportunities for co-working spaces. And one of the guys who spoke is an expert on all of this, and I thought that he was really good. He was just saying, like, just because you don't have that person, oftentimes makes that person feel like they don't belong. And so you constantly have to be working to create opportunities. Go to them and say, hey, you're not hanging out at our space, and that's not what we want. How can we create opportunities for you? I know our co-working space in Grand Junction, when we first started, it was started by like me and my buddy, so it was like a bunch of like single white dudes, and there was no women. And so we started working and having a couple females come to our events, and we just said, can we give you a leadership opportunity? Would you be able to start anything? So they started a female entrepreneurs group, and now they have over 50 women that are working there. And so, again, I think stuff like that's helpful.
The slow walk off.
Thank you.